We're back. We're back. We're back. So we have a big weekend in the sports world because this is an all sports podcast, pretty much. Come on here and talk about whatever we want to talk about sports wise, pretty much. So today we're going to be covering UFC 322 in world famous Madison Square Garden. Stoked for that one. We'll be going over some bets that I like there, doing a little bit of NHL content today. We got some young studs in the league that we're going to talk about. And you all know the Lane Kiffin Bowl and the Florida Gators head coaching search. So we're going to kick it off with UFC 322. This isn't going to be a full preview. Going to be a slight preview. I don't know how long this episode will be. Probably a little bit shorter than the past ones, but we're still going to do it because we're running short on time because I have to be up in a few hours and I still have not fell asleep. Anyway, main event at UFC 322 in Madison Square Garden. Anytime a UFC event is in Madison Square Garden, you know it's going to be a banger. So we have Islam Makhachev versus Jack Della Maddalena. Maddalena is coming off an upset win over Bilal Muhammad. You remember that fight. And one thing that I do want to mention from that fight is Jack Della Maddalena's wrestling defense and takedown defense. That was a huge key factor in that fight. He was really good with that in that fight. And when you're stepping into the cage with Islam, you really, really want to have that down pat. You know, this is Islam's first fight at welterweight. Questions will come as to how does Islam handle the extra weight on his body. First off, Islam is already looking big. He looks like he belongs at welterweight already. He did interviews talking about how he's starting creatine for the first time, which if you don't know, creatine helps it helps store water in your muscles. So obviously, when you have extra water weight, you gain weight. So it's like I guess more of a healthy weight. So you're not just eating bad and gaining all that weight. It's really just water weight, water retention. So Islam Makhachev is on creatine. Breaking news. Um, but look back at tongue twister. Look back at Jack Della Maddalena. He's a very good striker. He picked Bilal Muhammad apart in that fight. Um, but I just think the wrestling of Islam Makhachev is too good. You know, anybody that comes out of that could be Nurmagomedov factory. It's game over when it comes to the ground game. So I do think that Maddalena will get taken down pretty early by Islam, and I think it will be. I don't think he'll submit him early. I think it'll be more of a ground game thing where he's just um, controlling him on the ground, and just really running out the clock, kind of like what Hamzat Shemaev and DDP look like, but not to that extreme. I do think Islam will stand up and try and box him, try and make it a little bit of a slugfest before he shoots for the takedown. But um like yeah, I think he'll try and trade with him pretty early though. But another question is how well will Islam's chin hold up? Because we've seen him get brutally knocked out cold. We've seen him get dropped in a few fights. I know you can't say much about the knockout because it was like the first fight in his UFC career, but we've seen him get dropped since. And when you're moving up in weight, those punches are going to be hitting harder, and you're not used to being punched harder because obviously when you weigh more, you hit harder if you're a naturally bigger guy. But I do think Islam is a good enough wrestler to shoot for the takedown and take JDM down. And I think JDM he'll have a lot of trouble with Islam. I don't think his takedown defense will be as good as Islam because obviously when you compare the wrestling to Islam Makhachev and the wrestling to Bilal Muhammad, it's still not even close. Like Bilal's a pretty good grappler and wrestler, but it's not close. But the betting odds, you can get Islam at minus 300. Nobody wants that value. JDM at plus 225, which I do think with a puncher's chance, like we saw with Bilal Muhammad, if he sits there and picks him apart, even if he doesn't knock him out, JDM at plus 225, that's not bad to sprinkle. He is the naturally bigger guy. Who knows? The co-main event, Valentina Shevchenko, Valentina Shevchenko versus Willie Zhang. Zhang Weili. Anyway, Zhang is moving up from strawweight to featherweight, I believe, to go for another championship in another division because she's just that good. Experience wise, if you look at it, they're not far apart. I think they have about the same amount of fights. Maybe one has one more, one has one less. I'm not sure. Haven't done the math on that. But yeah, the experience wise, not far apart. If you look at the age, they're not far apart. Another one where you kind of question, because anytime a fighter moves up in weight, there's always going to be those little questions with every fighter. Um, you know, how will they do with the extra bit of weight on their body? How will they do taking a punch from a heavier person, a naturally bigger person? That's always a question. Because sometimes that extra weight can slow you down a lot, and it'll really throw off your whole game plan. And I do think Willie Zing will come out, and I think she's good enough to get through that. And I do think that she'll come in weighing lighter, so she'll still be quicker and everything. But how will that how will that be once you're on the ground? Because if you come in weighing lighter, even after rehydrating, you're still going to be lighter most likely. It's going to be easier to kind of toss you around in the octagon. But anyway, Shevchenko is the naturally smaller fighter, though, actually. It's just a. I think it's a good matchup. I think it's going to be a really good fight. You know, Zhang, she's a better grappler. Shevchenko's a better striker. So, 50-50 matchup. If you look at the betting odds, Shevchenko is a minus 135 favorite. Zhang is a plus 110 favorite. But I do think it will be a very fun fight. I think it could turn into a war, honestly. I think it's going to be good, and I think you should get on there. See, it's one of the better women's fights that you could make. Not the best, but one of the best. Maybe the best. I don't know. Depending on who you like. But I'll take Zhang on the money line here at plus 110. I really like that value. The next one, we're not breaking down every fight, by the way, just a few. And like I said, quick, just super quick so I can get into my bets, you know. And also don't tell these. I'm just on here having fun. Leon Edwards versus Carlos Prates. So we all know Prates, he's a dangerous striker against anybody pretty much, and he's shown that other than Ian Gary. But Leon, he's shown a little bit of slippage down the stretch with a few losses, one being to Sean Brady, one being to Bilal Muhammad. Um, I believe this is another step up for Prates, even though Leon is looking a little bit past his time. Um, we saw him step up against Ian Gary, like I just said, and he looked like he didn't even want to be there. Um, being that he's a smoker, he probably gassed out in a 5-round fight, but this is a 3-round fight, so that'll help Prates out some if the fight even goes 3 rounds. But I've been saying this for a while. I think Prates is going to catch him. I think he's going to get the knockout because I've seen too much slippage from Leon. I think he's going to leave his chin open, and I think that Prates is going to catch him because that's what Prates does. Prates is a minus 190 favorite if you want to take him there. Edwards is a plus 150 favorite. I like Prates by knockout. The odds keep changing, so I don't really know the odds right now, and I don't have my phone on me to check. But anyway, the next one is Sean Brady and Michael Morales. This fight is sick. You know, I'm most looking forward to this fight. Brady coming off a big win, like I just mentioned, against Leon Edwards. You know, pretty much shut out Leon in that fight. Looked great in there. Michael Morales is a step up for him, in my opinion. Morales, he has real power, as you know if you watch. He's Gonna have to catch Sean Brady if he wants to win this fight because I think Sean Brady's ground game is a little too good for him. Sean Brady, he's even improving his striking in these last few fights, but Sean Brady's ground game is very good, and I do think that Brady goes in there and gets a takedown, and with it being a three rounder, I think Morales does survive it. I don't think he gets submitted, but to play it safer, if I had to make a prediction, I'm taking Sean Brady to win. I would take Sean Brady on the money line because it's at minus 145, so that's decent value, you know? That's just my take on that fight. Some more fun bets that I kind of like, if you just want to sprinkle a little bit, Islam by submission, which is plus 190, is pretty crazy. Islam by decision plus 200, it's pretty crazy too. Um, if you want to sprinkle a little bit on JDM by KO, because I think that's his only path to victory, plus 500, I like the value there. So that's just a super quick recap, or not recap, a super quick preview of UFC 322 in Madison Square Garden. I'll do a more in-depth recap though on the next episode. Probably Sunday. Yeah, probably Sunday. So the Florida Gators head to Oxford, Mississippi to take on Lane Kiffin and the Ole Miss Rebels in what many are calling the Lane Kiffin Bowl. Obviously, everybody knows the coaching controversy going on, whether Lane Kiffin stays at Ole Miss or whether he leaves for Florida or whether he leaves for LSU. There's a lot going on. But anyway, yeah, they face off with each other this weekend. That's going to be very interesting. So, Ole Miss is still looking to keep their playoff hopes alive because as we get further into the season, playoff amplifications have not been bigger because there's a lot of one-loss teams right now. There's going to be very little two-loss teams. And it seems like where Ole Miss is in the rankings, they might need to win out to get in the playoffs. If they win out, they secure a spot in the playoffs. If they don't win out, then we'll have to see. You at least have to you can't drop any more than one game pretty much. So Ole Miss is looking to keep their season alive. The last time they faced each other last year in Gainesville, Ole Miss was kind of in the same situation. Later in the season, looking to keep your season alive, looking for that playoff spot. You have playoff hopes, and you go in there and you get punched out of the playoffs while you're in Gainesville against Florida. So Lane has already been Lane's already been doing his social media stuff this weekend, his social media trolling, which I love. I love that stuff. I love Lane Kiffin. But has Florida and Ole Miss fans all on their toes, just waiting for some sort of news to break because I see both fan bases going at it on Twitter like nonstop now. Because Ole Miss fans are saying that he's not leaving. Florida fans says it is a done deal. He's going to Florida. We don't know this. But anyway, he's been asked about the Florida job in a lot of interviews, and he's handled it probably the best that he could possibly handle it. I think there's going to be a ton of Florida fans at this game making that trip to Oxford just for the simple reason to get Lane's attention. I guarantee you're going to see some signs in that stadium in Oxford saying Lane to the swamp. Stuff like that. We see it. That's going to happen. You're going to see one if they allow it in. Maybe the stadium puts a ban on that. I don't know. But anyways, they're even going as far as saying Lane is bringing in Florida commits to Oxford to watch this game on recruiting visits, which is very, very interesting when it goes to the Florida head coaching job and all this and all that. But anyway, I do want to talk about the Florida job and the Florida head coaching hot board. So we'll get into that. Okay, so as the coaching carousel really gets even more crazier every day, there's a lot of people still on the hot seat. A lot of people still need jobs. A lot of teams need coaches. Florida is one of the main jobs open. And I think this is one of the better jobs because if you go back and watch that Georgia game, forget about the Kentucky game last week. Forget about that one. Go and look at the Georgia game against a top ranked team in the country. You know, that showed whoever takes his job You can come in, you can immediately come in and win. This roster is good, a good program that has been failed by a stubborn head coach who would not relieve his play calling duties. That's Billy Napier. But anyway, let's get into the candidates. So, first off, I think everybody knows this one. First one is Lane Kiffin. So basically, this is the guy that I think Florida will likely hold out for if they're going to hold out for a coach. And I've heard from a few people that they really, really like their chances and think that this is it, like a legit opportunity that Lane Kiffin could be a Florida Gator next year. We'll see. But the question is, how long do you want to hold out for Kiffin? Because if he's still in the playoff hunt, if he beats you this weekend, he's not going to make he's not going to make an official decision until after the season because you don't want those distractions inside your program when you're making a playoff run. And I think Kiffin knows that. I think Lane knows that. For Florida, if you don't make that decision, your time's kind of running out because lots of other big coaching positions open. Um, you know, they're going to start snagging up these candidates here pretty soon. You have a lot of jobs open. You have Florida, you have Penn State, you have LSU, you have Virginia Tech. Florida State might be open pretty soon. Maryland might be open pretty soon. Not that you're competing with the Marylands of the world, but still. Arkansas, Auburn, there's a lot of them. And there's more. Michigan State might be open. But obviously, yeah, Florida, they're going to have a backup plan to Lane Kiffin. But what happens if your backup plan does get hired somewhere else while you're holding out for Lane Kiffin? And then you hold out for so long, you don't get anybody that you want, so you're stuck in a weird place where there are no candidates left that you'd pay real legit money to come in and run this program. And then Lane Kiffin returns to Ole Miss. What do you do? What do you do? So it's very interesting. But obviously, for many reasons, this is a dream fit for Florida. Lane Kiffin comes to Florida. You know, when you're walking down the hallways, recruiting high school kids in their high school, the Florida logo is going to pop more than the LSU logo, or the Florida logo is going to pop more than the Ole Miss logo. And that's nothing against Ole Miss. I love Ole Miss too. But that's just the truth. You know, it's more of a draw when you see that logo. You think back of Tim Tebow and all those guys. It's it's obvious that it just pops more than that Ole Miss logo. But anyway, Florida is the most intriguing school in the state if you're talking about recruiting in state. And you literally have to drive like 30 minutes. You have 5 stars pretty much in your backyard. You're going to be able to recruit a lot of talent in Florida, probably more than Ole Miss, because at Ole Miss, you're still competing with the Alabamas of the world. You're competing with Mississippi State, even though you are getting all of Mississippi State's recruits pretty much. I'm not saying people are choosing to go there over Ole Miss, but you're still competing with Alabama, Auburn, pretty much all the SEC schools in that general area. I'd love to see this Lane Kiffin offense with that Florida speed. But anyways, the next candidate that I believe is probably the backup option, if I had to guess, but there are rumors of him maybe going somewhere else, which I've also heard. But I know some Florida fans might hate this, but it is Eli Drinkwitz. I don't think it's bad at all. I think people are kind of blowing this out of proportion, saying it's a bad head coaching. Or we're saying that he's a bad head coach. He's not a bad head coach. Again, he used the portal really good. He gets 5-star recruits to go to Missouri. What do you think he could do at Florida? He's going to go in there. He's going to recruit a lot of that Florida talent. He went into Missouri, flipped that program around, and made Missouri a cool place to go play. Florida's already a cool place to go play. So, if he can come in and make it even cooler, you know, the players like him. We'll see. I think Eli Drink is a good coach, though. The next one is Jed Fish. Another one that Florida fans, I've seen them not like it, but I have heard some rumors. Don't know what's true. Don't know what's not. But he has a Florida background. It is his alma mater. He played there. I have seen some rumors recently that have circulated, which, like I said, don't know the truth to it. But apparently, he's trying to find a way out of Washington because his family doesn't like it there. Maybe that was just some fake Twitter post that got spread around everywhere, but that's what I've been hearing. But he has also mentioned that he doesn't like his name floated around in these coaching conversations. But you're crazy to think if Florida called Jed Fish, he wouldn't pick up and even consider it. You know, go back to your alma mater. Every coach's dream, I believe, would be to go back to your alma mater, take him to a national championship, and win that thing. I think that Jed Fish would not turn down this opportunity. So I think that he's definitely in that top 3 to 4 range as far as guys they're looking at. And if Louisville doesn't extend Jeff Brom, he's not on my list. I do think that he will be in play too. The last one, let me clarify this one. I don't think Florida's looking at him, but if you want to go this route, I think this is the best option. That is Alex Golesh. If you want to go the G5 route, keep Golesh in Florida. You know, he's completely he's completely leveled up this USF program to an elite group of 5 program and a college football playoff contender. You know, I think Golesh is one of those guys that's just going to work out in terms of modern day head coaches. He's a younger guy. He's a fiery guy, cool personality, already in the state of Florida, so he doesn't really have to travel far to take the job. And he's very familiar with the state, obviously. But yeah, that team has legit talent over at USF2 in Tampa. If Florida hires him, he's going to bring in a lot of those guys over from USF, which may sound bad because you're bringing a group of 5 players over into play in the SEC. Doesn't matter. He's going to pick the guys that he really wants, that he knows can translate over. And that's what Kurt Signetti did in Indiana. He came from James Madison. He brought over all the guys to Indiana from James Madison who he thought would translate over to the Big Ten. And they went to the college football playoffs. So put Alex Golesh with a roster like Florida has now. Let him bring in his guys who he knows can make a major impact. You know, really good offensive mind. You have a 5-star quarterback. If he doesn't bring Byron Brown, you have a 5-star quarterback in DJ Lagway. Similar play styles to what he's developing right now. Who's to say he couldn't flip DJ Lagway's career around? Anyway, he's showing it at USF. Anyway, he's also a player's coach. So recruits are gonna want to go play for him. And this is a guy that went into Gainesville and he upset a Florida team previously that had playoff aspirations at the beginning of the year. Also, another stat is he came in and took a USF team that was 1-11 to a 7-6 season. So it shows he can come in and make an immediate impact. I think that he's the next big group of 5 project coach. Maybe I'm completely wrong on this, but this is just my opinion. Unless there is some PTSD there with hiring Billy Napier from the G5 route. I don't know, but I don't think there's a comparison. I think that Billy is good at what he does on his coordinator side of things. I think that Golesh is, you know, I think that he has what it takes to go win at a higher level because of how quickly he's flipped around this USF program. So yeah, not too in depth. We'll probably do another more in depth one as we get more news. But yeah, that's a little bit of what I'm kind of expecting for the head coaching search. So Lane Kiffin, Eli Drinkwitz, Jed Fish, Alex Golesh. Those are my 4 for what I think they're looking at. So okay, so to wrap this thing up, let's take about 5 minutes or so and talk about some NHL. Gotta clear my throat because man, I was just filming 3 other podcasts. I need some water. My throat's so dry. But anyway, let's talk a little bit about some NHL because this league is on the rise because of three kids: Connor Bedard, Macklin Celebrini, and Leo Carlson. These kids are good for the sport of hockey. So we're just gonna take a little bit into their stats, and I'll go more in depth on another episode too as we get further into the season. So we kind of get to see a little bit more of them. We'll go pretty far in depth. Anyway, if you remember Connor Bedard going into the draft process, he was probably the most highly touted prospect since they said Sidney Crosby. That's what they were saying. The first year, a lot of people said he didn't live up to it. Although I think he was perfectly fine. I think it was fine. People were calling him a bust, and I don't understand that. He didn't have a bad year. It makes no sense. Anyway, this year, Connor Bedard, Macklin Celebrini, and Leo Carlson. Macklin Celebrini also being a former number one pick. These kids are lighting the league on fire. Okay, so they're all tied for third in the league with 26 points, only 1 point behind Connor McDavid, and then in first place is Nathan MacKinnon with 33. So for these kids at this young age to be playing at the same level as those type of guys, it's incredible for the sport. You know, as far as Bedard and Celebrini go, both highly touted number one prospect or number one picks in their draft, like I said. They're going at it in a race and a big debate for the fans and the fan bases of the two teams for who is better. Who's having the better season because they're both so good this season? Who's the better prospect? Because they were both highly touted number one prospects for a long time. And they've lived up to it. They've lived every bit. So I think it's good for the sport because you have those arguments going around Twitter. People outside of hockey are seeing it and they're wanting to tune in to see what these kids are about. So, I also have people asking me that are not hockey fans at all. They're coming up to me asking about the Bedard and Celebrini thing. Like, yeah, there's another kid out there named Leo Carlson too. Right there with him. Right there with him. But it's awesome to see that hockey is finally getting some spotlight because I've been a hockey fan for, I'll be honest, not too long. I it's been a few years now, but not too long compared to others. But yeah. Anyway, all three of these teams are fun to watch because of these kids, which is the Ducks, the Sharks, and the Blackhawks. So also they were bad teams, obviously, because they all had high draft picks. And these kids have them all as fringe playoff contenders this year. And also to mention, Matthew Schaeffer over with the New York Islanders. People aren't talking about him because of him being a defenseman. He's not scoring as many goals as the centers are. And Bedard, Celebrini, and Carlson, he's played four less games, and he has 14 points or 16 points. Not far behind as a defenseman. Also the number one pick. Anyway, Matthew Schaeffer. Keep an eye on that one because we're going to be checking back in on him and Cutter Gauthier, who also plays on the same team as Leo Carlson. He was a Flyer. He was a Flyer. He got drafted by the Flyers. Traded after he went to Boston College and then said that he didn't want to play for the Flyers, so they traded him. And he's turning into a stud, which we all expected. But yeah, anyway, that'll do it for this episode. Like I said, not too in depth. We're just trying to get something out before the weekend because it's going to be a pretty busy weekend because I'll be heading to Vegas for F1 next weekend. So I'm just trying to get all the content out to get videos for the week. And we'll go more in depth on Sunday. We'll do a really good podcast on Sunday. So stay tuned for that one. Peace, guys. Thanks.